Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Hi.
All right, my class is starting. I will speak to you later. Take care.
Glad
Love
to
you.
see
Bye.
everybody.
Hello.
We are
Hi, guys. I'm flipping through the screens. I'm getting to see everybody. Hi.
Yes. I just can it wait till I just started my class.
So glad to see everybody.
We're going to just wait a couple minutes as people are still coming in.
Good.
Hi, Lynda.
How's everybody?
Hey, Cynthia. Hi. Nice to see everyone. Judy, you just popped up. I'm glad to see you.
Hi, Lynda. Yeah.
Hey, Dar. Hi.
Hey,
I see you waving.
How are you?
Hi, Sandy. I see you. I wish I could see everybody on one screen.
Too many people.
And
Yeah.
I'm going to get you that mirror, the romper room mirror.
Yeah, that's what we need.
That is exactly what I think it sounds like.
I know.
It sounds like romper room. It does. I know. It's true.
Happy memories.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't hear them.
We're not talking.
Now, we haven't gotten started yet. We're still letting everybody
Oh, here they
check
are.
in.
Okay, I got it.
I lost you.
Judy and Joel Friedman. Huh?
Hello.
Yeah, I think I lost
Hi,
you.
how are you?
Hello.
I'm fine.
Hey, Judy.
No idea what happened. I'm fine.
Hello.
I had a high heart rate, really high.
Hi, Judy.
And then it went away.
Hi,
I came home.
Cynthia.
So I'm on medication.
Hi,
Very
Estelle.
I'm just
We'll
tired.
see what's doing.
Welcome back to Florida.
Thank you.
No, sweetheart, I'm fine.
Oh my
Thank you.
goodness.
Just starting my
Sunny
library
Florida.
Zoom
Hi, Arlette.
meeting. Yeah, the book club. Do you do that?
Hi,
How you
Arlette.
doing, Judy?
Oh, well,
Great.
it's just starting now. Everything else okay?
Nice to see everybody. If you're on the phone,
Okay.
you might want to mute yourself.
Good.
Okay, so I'm going to mute
Okay,
everybody.
but I saw that Wendy
Yeah.
was chopping down the tree at, what's her name? Maria's today.
Okay, so everybody right now should be muted. And is your microphone working?
I just unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
Perfect. Okay, so hi everybody. This is Debbie Hockman from the David Posnack JCC, and I'm going to welcome everybody for another edition of Book Discussion with Lynda Levin, which is a partnership program that we happily do every month with the Friends of the Sterling Road Library. And that partnership is one of our favorite partnerships. And we're happy that if you came from either the library or you came from the JCC or just in the community, that you came today to join us. Just a couple little housekeeping notes. This is supposed to be a discussion. So Lynda she's going to give a review of the book. She will be asking questions to all of you, and there's a couple ways that you can be part of the discussion. Either you can use the chat down at the bottom of your screen, and I will see the chats and read them to Lynda, or you can use the raise hand option, and we will see your hand up and doing it. Unfortunately, the actual raising your hand doesn't always work because we may not see you, because actually right now we have 4 screens going, and we're not always able to see all 4 screens at the same time. So just remember those little housekeeping tips. Otherwise, I wanted to also tell you that next month we will be doing this again on April 20th, and we will be reading the book Salt to the Sea. Salt to the Sea? That's right.
Salt to the Sea, Ruth Sepetys. Mm-hmm.
How do you say it?
Ruth Sepetys is the author, Salt to the Sea.
Okay, and that'll be on April 20th, and the registration is already online. We see people already starting to register for that. So, if you want to be a part of that program, you have a month to read the book and you can be a part of that program.
Thanks.
And it, as well as when you're on that page, I hope that you will look at some of the other programs we have going on this month at the JCC. There's a lot of really great ones. And today, I got notice, we had Tim Shriver coming with Deepak Chopra next week. And originally that was, you had to pay for that program, and they have now made it no fee. So it doesn't yet say that online because I just got that information, but you are the first people to hear that. But if you want to take part in that Tim Shriver program with Deepak Chopra, wait till tomorrow and you can register with no fee. So just let you know that. You just got that secret right from me. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. Lynda, are you ready?
I am. Yes, I am.
Okay, so I'm gonna pass it over to the lovely Lynda Levin.
Great. Okay, so Salt to the Sea for next month. And for May, we're doing a book called The Exiles by Christine Baker Klein. I'll give you a little bit of a head start. I've heard from people that have read it that it is really wonderful. And in June, we're planning on doing Lady Clementine by Marie Benedict. Okay, so we've got those at the library if you want to use the library. And otherwise, of course, you know, people share books and get them wherever you can. Okay. I want to begin by giving you a little bit of a background about the author of our book for today, which is called Anxious People, okay? We'll talk a little bit about how you felt about the book as we get a little bit later on, but I want to tell you that this is Fredrik Backman, who was the author of a book called A Man Called Ove. Do you remember that one? It was a real bestseller. We all love that book, I think. He also wrote another one that was very well received. In fact, all of his books have been bestsellers. My grandmother asked me to tell you she's sorry. Britt Marie Was Here. Beartown, Us Against You. He's written 2 novellas. He's written 1 nonfiction. And his books have been published in more than 40 countries, all of them hitting bestseller status. He lives in Stockholm, Sweden with his wife and 2 children. Here's something I found very fascinating in doing research about him. This particular book is very personal to the author. After writing this book, Anxious People, Backman wrote about his personal knowledge about depression and anxiety. He doesn't often talk about it, but he decided to share his own personal story once and for all on his website after a mother heard him speak once about it and wanted more information for her daughter who had her own struggles with anxiety and depression, and he wanted to be as helpful as possible. So for his full explanation, I refer you to his website, but just as an overview, what he writes, this 5th novel that was so successful as all his books are, took nearly everything out of him to finish, and he ended up in a breakdown afterwards. He admits it makes no sense that he would feel depression, which he describes as an aching of the soul, because after all, he's such a successful author. He's got a loving wife. He's got wonderful children. But he says, crazy enough, his success is one of his problems. His writing is met with incredible demands. The more success, the more interviews, the more book tours, the more criticism, the more attention, all of it leads him to panic attacks. And he knows what people expect from him, and he's always worried about disappointing. He's hard on himself, but he tells us that he's had depression on and off since he was a kid, and it's no one's fault but his own. He says he wasn't cut out for reality. That's why he writes. He uses his imagination not only for writing stories, but also to go to places where he can hide. He says being a writer is a dream, but being an author, on the other hand, that's a career. And he says he was really never suited for that because he was never really suited for reality. He doesn't want to sound ungrateful, but he feels less like a person than a product. And he says he can't even think about work sometimes without feeling stress. He knows rationally how lucky he is, but he experiences anxiety that feels like tiny weights in his blood, making him heavy, holding him down. He writes when he was 20 years old, a good friend of his, someone very, very important to him, chose to end his life. And he thinks about that guy a lot. He says he is working on his health. He encourages everybody struggling to get help. For everybody else, he says, if you want to do something nice, reach out to friends and coworkers and simply ask if they're okay. He says he understands the feeling of hurting and the desire for peace. He says most don't get cured of these things, but they do learn to live with depression and anxiety. He says some of us try to use it creatively, not to get an audience or fame or success, but just to silence the voices in our heads. Reading this and knowing now about the author's background, it made me appreciate the book even more and the characters that he creates. It appears that the author is like a lot of the characters. He's a person who looks so successful on the outside, but when revealed, what do we see? We see his own anxieties and his own personal struggles. Okay, so that leads us to a summary of the book. Now, I know from some of you that you did not finish the book, so we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the detail in the book as we go through this. But to begin, let me tell you that this is a novel about a crime that never took place, a would-be robber who disappears into thin air, and 8 extremely anxious strangers who find they have more in common than they ever imagined. So the author tells us, usually we're looking at real estate isn't a life or death situation, but in this case it was. These people go to an apartment viewing, an open house, and all of a sudden a failed bank robber bursts in and he takes this whole group of strangers as hostages. The captives include a recently retired couple, and their names are Roger and Annalina. And they are a couple that relentlessly hunt down fixer-uppers. And of course, what we come to realize is they're trying to avoid the painful truth, which would fix their own marriage. And then we've got this wealthy bank director. Her name is Zara, and she's been too busy and too self-involved to care about anyone or anything else. We've got a young couple who are about to have their first child, but they're arguing all the time. They can't seem to agree on anything from where they want to live or even how they met in the first place. And their names are Julia and Ro. Add to this mix, we've got Estelle. She's an 87-year-old woman who has lived long enough that she's not even afraid when the bank robber bursts in. And we know, of course, there's going to be a lot more to Estelle than meets the eye, as there is with all of them. And then we've got this real estate agent who is really quite annoying. She's a ready-to-make-a-deal kind of gal. We've also got a mystery man by the name of Lennart, who has locked himself in the apartment's only bathroom. And as the story progresses, we learn that the bank robber is actually quite bad at the job. For starters, the bank robber has tried to rob a cashless bank, and that the bank robber asked for only 6,500 kroner, a rather unusual amount for a bank robber. And then, as it turns out, the bank robber comes to realize that these people in the apartment, they are the worst group of hostages ever. Now, this is an interesting thing. Each of these people, now hostages, carries a lifetime of grievances, hurts, secrets, and passions that are ready to boil over. None of them are entirely who they appear to be, and all of them, the bank robber included, desperately need some kind of rescue. Picture that the authorities and the media are surrounding the premises and they're waiting for the release of the hostages. But what's happening is that the hostages are becoming allies and they reveal surprising truths about themselves. And they all set in motion a chain of events that are so unexpected that even they can hardly understand or explain what happens next. What we know is that when the police search the apartment after the hostages are released, the bank robber is nowhere to be found. And later, when interviewed, the hostages are useless in helping the police find the bank robber. Now, what is peculiar about this particular apartment is that it has a beautiful view of a certain bridge. And what we come to learn is that the bridge has its own story. 10 years before, a man who had lost everything after he invested in a bank that went bankrupt felt he had no choice. He had let down his family. And so he went to the bridge and he stood on the railing and he was prepared to jump. And a teenage boy saw him and tried to talk him out of it, to convince him, don't jump, your children love you, don't jump. And just as the boy thought he was successful, the man jumped. The teenage boy was devastated. The boy, haunted by the memory, went back to the bridge several times later that week. He was actually hoping to kind of relive the experience and maybe the man wouldn't jump. And one time when he went back, he saw a teenage girl standing on that same railing, and she was prepared to jump. And this time, he did not try to talk her off the railing. Instead, he simply ran to her and he pulled her off the railing, accidentally knocking her unconscious until an ambulance came. He left before the ambulance, and the boy and the girl never saw each other again. So, how does the author connect what happened on that bridge 10 years ago to the people who happened to be in that apartment? And the answer is he does it in an ingeniously constructed story. So, let me begin by asking you, what did you think of the author's approach, his style of writing? Go ahead, unmute yourself if you have something to say. Let's hear from you. Chat.
I loved it, Lynda. This is Fern Cantor talking.
Yeah, tell your name too, because I don't see all the screens. Go ahead. Fern, yeah, go ahead.
I thought this was his most quirky. I've read all his books. I loved it. I loved the ending. I thought his presentation of the characters and at the police stations was ingenious. I couldn't wait to read the next chapter, which were also laid out in a very interesting and different way. I think the man is a brilliant genius, even if he's slightly uncorked.
Okay, good way to put it. Okay. Anyone else? And even if you, by the way, I know some of you told me you had trouble with the book. So if you did, speak up. Go ahead.
I
would like to speak. It's
Sorry.
Kathy.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Hi, Linda. I've read several of his books. My favorite by far is A Man Called Ova. I read it twice and I absolutely howled with laughter. I saw the movie. I love that book. I've read others and couldn't get into them, although I did finish most of them. This one I really liked. I laughed out loud. I thought it was ingenious. It was a puzzle. And
It was a puzzle. Good way to put it. Yeah.
To do this, how's he going to? But I have to say, I've really pondered this basic story and the bank robber and the morality. Now, a crime wasn't committed.
Okay.
But she terrified people.
Okay.
And that's an open question that I think we need to examine.
Address at the end. Absolutely. Come back to that, Kath. Okay. Come back to that. Good. Who else had something?
Lynda, there's a number of people that have their hand up. One is Davia, and then there's a couple of comments on also. So Davia, actually I have Davia and then Darlene. So Davia, do you want to go first?
Yeah.
Mute yourself.
So I'll give like the flip side. I've read 2 of his books, Beartown and Us Against Them, and I love them. And so when I heard you were doing one of his books and that Lynda was reviewing it, I wanted to read it. But I did not like the book, although I do think it was very clever. And I did like the ending, but I thought that it was too long. And I also was really put off by the fact that he kept referring to the characters as idiots. And but he did, and I don't even really understand that because clearly he didn't see them that way. And I will also say that my distaste for the book, I think, had to do also with the way that it was read. The reader was very good. Her name is Marin Ireland, and she's one of my favorite audio readers. But she took this tone with the characters that I thought was a little bit demeaning of their personalities. And so it really wasn't until the end that you saw the point of the book. And I also thought that there weren't enough clues during the book to the fact that the end was going to turn out the way that it did, and that the characters were, in fact, so sympathetic and clearly not idiots.
You know, it's so interesting, Davia, because there were a lot of people that told me they had trouble getting through the first half. And I have to admit, I was not as into the first half as I was. Once you got to the halfway point, I told people, keep reading, because at the end, you really do see the characters the way he really wants you to see them. Okay, good. I want to come back to the whole idea of idiots. That's interesting. What else? Anyone else have any comments? Yeah. Oh, you had more comments. Go ahead.
And then Estelle. Darlene and then Estelle.
I just felt that there were little clues that were given, and I kept thinking, did I miss something? reading up to a certain point. It was interesting. Like, I really didn't miss it. And he explained everything. And it was the first time I sat there, I was laughing at some of the things. It was just so silly. So it gave me, during this pandemic time, a relief. So that was nice.
Thank you. That's right. I found it the same way, Dar. Very entertaining. It was entertaining.
Yes.
Anyone else? Yeah.
We have Estelle has her hand up. Estelle, do you want to go ahead and unmute? Oh, I don't know what it is.
He's my
There you go.
new favorite author. I've read almost all of them, and I just think he's a genius. Every single one of them is good if you really read them and think about what you're reading. I agree with what you said about the first part, and then when I finished it, the whole book, I had to go back and reread the whole thing, and it was all news to me the second time too, and I thought it was fantastic.
And what's so amazing is when you go back and you read it the second time, you really do get to see the clues, right? You really get to see. Sandy, I see your hand up.
It was a very unusual novel. It starts off with a lot of sarcastic humor between the two policemen, the father and son, but then it gets more serious. And when the author talks about life, and you can almost tell that he's coming to some of it through experience.
Absolutely.
What he says. So it goes from humor to seriousness. It weaves the characters together through this bridge and various other things. And I liked it.
I'm glad. I found it too, the mix of the humor with the poignancy. And Sandy, you're bringing out another thing that I had sort of thought to myself. He has a lot of big ideas in there. And I actually, thought-provoking ideas that I actually made a little list of that if we have time, we can go over at the end, because he really brings up a lot of things that I think many of us have thought about, right? So it's sort of interesting in that way.
And
When you
read
it,
there's a number of comments in the chat, and it's really a very big mix of people who struggled with the book, or they struggled in the beginning, and then by the end they liked it. And it's really, I think, very interesting, because you and I had talked about that also, about how you had to really kind of get in, and then there was a point you hit and you're like, I just can't put the book down. But I really think that it's interesting. There's a lot of people making comments about how they that some of it. So for anybody out there who maybe was having trouble in the beginning, I think this is an interesting thing for you to hear, that is a general sense, that there's a lot of people that didn't enjoy the beginning because of his writing, but stick with it.
Yeah. If you haven't finished it, you might still want to, because when you go back and you read, you really appreciate how clever. The 3 clues that he tells you that I thought were interesting is, first of all, that the apartment viewing happens on the day of New Year's Eve. So it's an odd day, right? That's one thing. The second thing is that the apartment next door is vacant, which you kind of you pass over, you don't really think about that. And then the third thing is, of course, that the balcony has this excellent view of the bridge. And those are sort of the pieces that he kind of ties everything together. I also like the way that he reaches out to you directly, to the reader. Did you notice that as well? All of a sudden, like when he's telling the story about the bridge, he says, 10 years ago, a man was standing on the bridge. Well, you don't need to think about him now. Well, obviously, you can't stop thinking about him now. It's like saying, don't think about cookies. Well, of course, what happens? You're thinking about cookies. And of course, it's lighthearted, but it's also very true. Tell somebody not to think about something, and what are they going to do? That's all they're obsessed with thinking about. So he directly speaks to the reader. The other thing I thought was so interesting is that things really in this story are not what they appear to be. And the first thing was about the 2 policemen. When you're first reading it, what do you think? They're 2 guys that are partners, paired up. They're in the car together. You see generational differences. We see that the 2 men drive each other crazy. There's a difference in age, and therefore you see all these different things. One uses Google as a verb. The young guy says, I'll Google this. The other one says, the older one says, I'll read Google. You know, there are a lot of their taste in food. One likes mashed potatoes and hot dogs, the older guy. The younger cop likes, you know, algae and all kinds of other seaweed and raw fish. So you see generational differences. And then all of a sudden you're really surprised, because what do you find out? They're father and son, right? So, but he sort of sneaks that in a very, it's revealing. And of course, it's more poignant when you reread it and you realize one of the lines is, older men rarely know what to say to younger men to let them know they care. It's so hard to find the words when all you want to say is, I know that you're hurting. Well, you realize it's not just a generational thing. He's talking about his own son, right? So there's a lot of that when you go back and you reread. And it gives a lot more poignancy to it because you realize it's a father and a son. Also, what was another sneaky thing that you realized as you were reading that you did not get in the beginning?
That the female, the robber was female.
Wasn't that amazing?
Halfway through chapter 11, I was in shock.
And when you go, that's right, and when you go back and you reread it, it's amazing how there's no pronouns, right? Yeah. And no name, and all the bank robber. Exactly. So clever. Everything in there. If you remember from the story, these are a couple details we don't need to go into, but the hostages think that the gun is fake and it's real. They see the fake blood. They think it's real and it's fake. They see a box of Christmas lights on the step. And what do they think it is? You could call out, by the way, when I ask a question like that. A bomb, exactly, yeah. So there's a lot of surprises in the story, right? There's a lot of humor in the story. Anyone remember anything that was funny to you? That you, I did too. I laughed out loud. Anyone?
Yes, the lime.
The lime falling, exactly.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Choices for sure.
What?
The pizza choices.
Exactly.
Pizza.
Right.
Rabbit head. The rabbit in the bathroom.
Rabbit head.
The rabbit in the bathroom.
I heard you just say about the rabbit. I thought that was
rabbit.
Actually,
that was funny.
That was really, really funny when the rabbit comes out of the bathroom. And remember, we know Roger, the husband, he's like a real competitive guy. He wants to get the apartment. He's a negotiator. He's going to get this apartment. And all of a sudden they open up the bathroom door. And just for those of you to refresh your memory, Lennart is there. He's wearing a rabbit's head on him. And he says, well, I'm here because of Annalina. She requested that I come. And you think, oh my God, are they meeting for an affair? Why are they together? Why is that guy there? And all of a sudden Roger turns to his wife and he says, do you know this person? Annalina says, yes, but it's not what you think. Roger struggled before managing to utter the impossible words. Is he another prospective buyer? You think for sure he's going to say, is he your lover? And is he another prospective buyer? You really laugh out loud.
God, I love that.
Some of these, I guess if we were to go over them together, we would say, well, you had to be there. You had to read it, but it really is. There was a lot of humor. Anything else that you remember?
Yes, I thought Estelle was a real hoot. And when
Estelle was a hoot.
She was a hoot. And when she went for the wine,
yes,
in the cabinet, oh my God, I thought she was really well done.
Really well done. What else? Anything else about Estelle? I remember something very funny about Estelle. Estelle wanted to describe to the police afterwards about Julia and Roe, right?
Yes.
So she says they are from Stockholm. And the policeman says, what do you mean? They're from Stockholm. What does that mean? It's a gay couple. So that was really funny. But I really laughed about, there was one line that was really funny. She says, she's talking about her husband. She says, my husband, he was not prejudiced either. In fact, years ago, I was cleaning his office and I found he had a whole magazine devoted to people from Stockholm. It was like really funny. She was like, so she was really a hoot. She was a hoot. Anything else, guys? That was funny.
There was one place where Jim and Jack are talking to another policeman outside the condo, and he has something stuck in his teeth. And I'm going to discuss that in my book. It was so funny how the policeman kept trying to get something stuck out of his tooth, and it was a cashew. And then at the end, he says he doesn't know what to do with the cashew. I mean, just little details like that were hysterical.
Right, exactly. Anything else you can think of? Or let me ask you this then. The author tells us, and this gets back to the comment that Davia made in the beginning, because I think it was Davia, he starts off the story by telling us that this is about a bank robbery, a hostage drama, and police officers on their way to storm an appointment, and it all started from a really bad idea, and this is a book about idiots. So what do you think he means by that, and what do you really think this book is about? What does he mean? Well, let's go back to the idiots. What does he mean that this is a book mostly about idiots? Okay, so Debbie, you got a thought on that?
Yes, I think that he's not really talking about idiot in the sense of mean idiot. It's just the fact that everybody makes good and bad decisions, and there's many factors that take us there. And sometimes somebody else would look at you and be like, why did you make that decision? Like, why would you have made that decision? You're an idiot. But the thing is that we're all idiots. Nobody really knows all the other stuff that took us to that point. So
that's sort of how I looked at it also. How many times do we say, oh my God, I did the most idiotic thing? We do these things. And so I think he was perhaps using it in that way.
Lynda, I wanted to just mention something. I'd be very interested in the Swedish word and the translation that they used.
Oh, that's so interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I would be very, because I lived in Sweden for a while, and I'd be very interested to know how they translated that, because I put a comment in. I thought the translations in all of his books were just absolutely brilliant.
Yes, they were. I think so too. It's hard to imagine that this was actually written in another language.
Yes.
And I think also too that was interesting what Davia was saying about the reader, because I do think that reading it on your own, you probably took the word different than hearing it. If somebody was reading it to you, could have, like what she was saying about that, the way that the person reading the book set the audio. So that may have been a different translation compared to when you're reading it. And I don't know.
Yeah, It was almost like the reader was, in the tone and dialect she used, was making fun of the characters. But now during this discussion, I'm thinking that maybe at the beginning, he called them all idiots. It was like a device to advance the plot.
Right.
Now knowing what the end was.
Right.
Because otherwise, if he didn't call them idiots, that explained why they were so unhelpful to the police.
Yeah. Well, when by the way, that was the humor in the beginning. It's so ridiculous how they keep getting the police off subject. What do you realize after reading the end? It's all intentional. Right? It's all intentional. They don't want to give any information. So they end up revealing a lot about themselves, actually, as they're talking to the police. Yeah.
Maybe he's saying that you shouldn't be so quick to judge people,
By the way,
knowing their whole story.
100%. I agree with that.
Definitely.
What do you think are the underlying themes here? What did you pick up on there? There was one that was very strong to me. Any other thoughts before I go? I thought the whole idea of parental love was very, very strong in this. Well, the whole idea of love. But definitely, you get that feeling of parental love from the get-go with the police, with the father and the son, right? Also, the bank robber. Why does he jump? The man on the bridge. Why does he jump? He jumps because he's let his family down. And it was terrible that he was, he invested this money and lost the money, and he jumps, seeing no way out. What about the bank robber? Why is she robbing this bank? What did we come to realize? Why is she robbing the bank?
Keep her children.
Her children.
To keep her children. Exactly right. To keep her children. So you see this strong parental love. Anything else that you picked up on this?
No comments.
How about the whole idea that people just, that we all, underneath the facade that we do have many similar insecurities, anxietives.
We're all anxious, Lynda. We're
all anxious. Exactly.
The anxiety of all of us, of all of them, comes through. But anxious about what? Anxious about buying the apartment, anxious about finding out who they are, anxious about their relationships with each other. It was there's so many levels of this book.
There's so many, and I felt like it was so much about, they say that he really has an understanding of human nature, right?
Yeah.
I love that part about how, you know, we're all pretending. We all pretend that we're normal. We all pretend that we understand inflation and amateurization. I can barely say the word. You know, we all how to use what is it, USB? You know, it's like, it's funny. And how is it that everybody else seems like they know all these things and we don't? So it's sort of, you see where that anxiety also, and Roger too, the whole idea of being good enough for whatever you're doing, having that anxiety.
There's also the theme of like the negative influence of global corporations, like with respect to Roger and his job and the banking industry. And really it was, you know, those corporations that caused a lot of these issues.
And
the
Zara
housing bubble and the suicides.
Right. She's really the personification of exactly what you're talking about. Exactly. We see that in Zara. And she has her own conflicts with all of that. We'll see how she resolves it.
Also, I think there was a lot of focus on the role of women.
Yeah.
I think of Annalina, how she had to hide her success.
Yes.
And Zara, she just had to close down and focus on her job. Every woman in there had such a fascinating backstory.
And again, it was all slowly revealed, Talk about Jack. Who was Jack, by the way? Who was Jack?
He rescued Nadia.
Okay, so Jack was the teenager who rescued Nadia. Exactly. What do we know about Jack? What do we know about Jack? He is the teenager. He did rescue Nadia. He is, what do we know about him? Okay, what drew him to police work?
He wanted to help people. His sister was an addict. And
exactly. So okay, and it all started, good, Kathy, exactly. That's what I was thinking. I was going to say, did you say his mother, right?
His mother.
Very influenced by his mother, who happens to be Jim's wife, right? We know that she is gone. But both Jim and Jack are so heavily influenced by this woman who was a priest. And she had a few adages that they lived by. And what were they? Do you remember any of them?
Well, Lynda, Susan Weiss had written, if you save one person, you can save the world.
That's exactly right.
And Sandy happens to have her hand up. So Sandy, do you want to unmute?
Yeah, that was before the theme of guilt and empathy.
So important. In the end, the whole story's theme is guilt and empathy. Exactly.
And I love that quote about the planting the apple tree.
Good. The mother really used to always say to them, even if I knew that the world was going to hell or going to pieces or was going to be destroyed, I would still plant an apple tree, that you always try your best to save others. And she really always believed that the process of him saving Nadia is what drew him to become a police officer. He always wanted to rescue people. And again, it did begin with his own sister, who he tried so hard to rescue from her drug addiction, but was very, very unsuccessful. Of course, we know that Jack always had nightmares of the man who jumped and that he could not save. So in that case, what do we know about his father, Jim? What do we know about Jim?
He loved his wife very much and was devastated when she died.
Devastated, influenced by her still, right? What else? Loved his son so totally, knew how his son was affected by the man who jumped on the bridge. And I think it's interesting that the author, who again really knows human nature, he knows that Jim, the father, has nightmares. Jack has nightmares about the man who jumped. What does Jim have nightmares of? His nightmares are of Jack who jumps. So you really see this strong. Also, remember when it came time to decide who was going to deliver the pizza up to the hostages? What does Jim do? He says, no way are you going. I'm not putting, I can't allow, your mother would kill me if she knew that I was putting you in danger. So he can't put his son in any danger. Let's move on to Zara, because you all started talking about her. She's probably one of the most interesting of the characters. She looks right away. We know, how does she appear? She looks too rich for this type of an apartment. She's not scared when the bank robber comes in because she herself has contemplated suicide, so that doesn't really bother her. So what do we find out about Zara? What's her connection to the bridge, first off?
Oh, she was the one that almost did he say?
She didn't give the loan.
Okay, she did not. She was the bank director who turned the man down who jumped from the bridge, right? Okay,
Correct.
so she lived with that guilt.
And she still has a letter in her purse from him for 10 years already.
Okay, and has she ever opened that letter to read it? No, she cannot bring herself to do it. She is haunted by the fact that that guy jumped from the bridge. And so she herself goes back to the bridge on different occasions. And one time she goes, and what does she see?
Another girl on the bridge.
She sees that girl on the bridge, and she sees Jack rescue the girl, knock her off, right? And after the ambulance takes the girl away, what happens? Zara goes up to the bridge. She finds the wallet. She finds the girl's name. And what's her name? Nadia. Exactly. And she starts to be obsessed with Nadia, and she starts to follow her life and her education, and she develops this secret obsession. What is Zara's secret obsession? She has a couple, but one, which is what? Her secret obsession.
Visiting the houses that are for sale.
Viewing
She goes to all these apartments that have a view of that bridge. Not that she's interested in buying, but she just needs to go and see that bridge. Exactly. 10 years later, we know she goes to a psychologist. And of course, who does she go to? She's following Nadia's education, and she goes to Nadia. She gives her a really hard time. Nadia realizes right away this is a woman who is suffering from loneliness. What else do we know about Zara? She's a difficult person. Go ahead. Anybody else want to chime in?
She's very angry.
Very angry, very lonely.
She feels guilt.
Guilt, driven by guilt. What else? She has a lot of money. She uses that money to buy distance from people. She doesn't let anybody ever get close to her. She believes that happiness is like money, a made-up value that represents something you can't weigh or measure. She says having a purpose in life, a job, a goal, it's much more important than happiness. And she thinks that people would far rather be rich than happy. That's her in a nutshell. Anything else we know about her? What does she ask Nadia, by the way? It's very telling. She asks Nadia, do you believe that there are any bad people? And Nadia says to her, well, I think if there are, they probably can't live with themselves. And Zara realizes she too can't live with herself if she thinks she's really bad. So for that reason, what does she not do that she hasn't done for all these 10 years? She won't open up the envelope, because if she opens up the envelope, what is she afraid she's going to find? What is she afraid of? What is she afraid the man wrote?
That he'll accuse her. Yeah, that he'll blame her.
That he blames her, exactly, and she can't live with that. I thought it was interesting too that Zara has all this voices in her head, which is what the author talks about, right? And she's got to silence it. So what does she do when she gets home? The first thing she does?
Loud music.
Loud, horrible, hard metal music, right? And she blasts it. And Nadia teaches her one thing. She says, listen, buy some good headphones. At least then you can have this obsession, but at the same time you can go out and meet people and even possibly fall in love. And of course, we like that because we know the ending of the story. Nadia, how did her teenage years affect her? What happened that she ended up on that bridge in the first place as a kid 10 years before? Debbie, you got any thoughts on that?
The Nadia character was like not I don't think she resonated as much with me. So I'm trying to think I'm like, what happened? I know that she just didn't have friends. Like she didn't feel.
That's exactly right. He doesn't paint a
feel
full
connected.
picture, but you
Yeah.
get her as a typical teenager, right?
Yeah.
Not feeling she's pretty enough, feeling she's so ugly, feeling, she's a kid and she feels very broken and she goes to the bridge. And of course, she always wondered, would she have taken that step forward? And what is very interesting is that particular incident, when she goes to the bridge, she questioned later on in life, what was the difference between her, who did not end up jumping, and the man on the bridge who did jump? And that question drove her to become what?
Psychologist.
A psychologist. It drove Jack to become a policeman. And of course, what do we realize? What did save her that day?
Jack. Saved her.
Yeah. She say it later on. Zara tries to tell her she saved herself, but we know that it was Jack's exceptional kindness that really does end up saving her. And of course, she knows the pain, and I think this is the crux of the book. She knows the pain that her people have, her patients, and that's why she realizes she needs to help people in their pain, because she knows how heavy that burden can be. And of course, that's why she puts up with a patient like Zara. And of course, we know that Nadia and Jack never saw each other again, but both of them were driven to their careers because of that encounter. What about the bank robber? What do we know about her?
Well, I just want to ask you one question where you were talking before about with Nadia and Zara. Do you think that Zara was open to love because of what she did with Nadia? Or do you think what was it that created that revelation? Because
you mean at the end? At the end?
What do you think made her more open to love? I mean, just the idea that she didn't.
At the very end, you mean?
Yeah,
with
yeah.
Lennart. Okay. So that's an interesting question. What do you guys think? What do you think enabled her to fall in love with Lennart?
Because that was definitely something that I was because that was a big character change, that she opened up herself. And I wasn't sure if that was her.
Sandy's got a thought. Unmute yourself, Sandy.
Unmute me. One of the first encounters was Zara talking to Lennart, but Lennart has this rabbit's head on him.
That's right.
So Zara doesn't have to look into his eyes.
That's right.
So there's that distance that she's able to have at the same time as communicating with him.
Right. And that's a great scene. She's got her headphones on, right? And she's listening to this blasting music, but this guy just keeps talking to her. And they're smoking out on the balcony, right? In that scene. And in that scene, I love the way the author says, they talked, they smoked, and they floored each other, which is so cute because, of course, they're out on the balcony, in the apartment. They floored each other at that point. So the answer is, I think slowly she herself is shocked. After working with Nadia, meeting Lennart, she's deciding she's developing for the first time any kind of empathy. And all of a sudden that enables her, because really Nadia had opened her up to the point that she was able to even have she was even going out with those headphones. And she was now able to even have that conversation with Lennart with his rabbit's head eye. That was cute that she didn't have to look him in the eye, right? Okay, anything out, just going back to the bank robber, we know her desperation, right? And what is revealed about her is that what we know, her desperation, where it springs from. The fact that the rent was due, the lawyer was trying to take away the children, she didn't have a place for the children to live, and she's desperate for the money. So that's what's really driving her. Roger and Annalina were another interesting pair. What do you want to say about them? What do we know about Roger? He acts like a real know-it-all. He's kicking the floorboards. He acts like a big, macher, right? But in fact, what?
It was a surprise that she was actually, I think that was another one of those surprises where you were like, what? That she had that big job and she was the breadwinner and she was the one who had the career.
Right. And Kathy, as Kathy points out, she had made herself very submissive to him to make up for that point, right? She always acted as if she was very, very submissive to him. Anything else? We know that he had been an engineer and he's really feeling very diminished. The fact that the police don't even put his line of work in their notes. He's very competitive on the outside to mask all of these insecurities that he has. Anything else? How about Annalina on the outside?
Well, Jackie had commented that he has supported her for all those years. And that was an interesting part of their relationship, that he was the one who did the support.
That he had allowed that to happen, right. And as a result of that, when it was his turn to really be successful, he was already too old at that point. Any other thoughts that anybody has? I think it's really interesting about Annalina, who at this point feels that they have nothing in common, she and her husband, and therefore they go ahead and they fix up these apartments. And all she wants is to find an apartment that's going to be a home rather than an investment. And she says things like people who go to viewings. And by the way, this is one of those things somebody brought up before about having profound thoughts in there, as well as humor. And if they're at the apartment, she's crying, talking to the policeman, and she says, people who go to viewings think that everything would be better if only they could live there, that they'd wake up in the mornings and not find it hard to breathe. They wouldn't have the invisible weight in their chest, and they'd argue less. This whole idea, a profound idea that people want fresh starts, thinking that maybe a new apartment will afford that, when in fact we all know that that doesn't necessarily happen.
She thinks just a comment that came in that said, incidentally, 6,500 krona is about $765.
Okay.
So I think that's something to bring up, that as
right. That was what she needed for rent. And that was going to be the price of losing her children, was for that very simple amount. Okay, so the truth is, we see where she thinks their marriage is falling apart. And the truth is, how do they really feel about each other? Do you remember anything about that? What are the ways in which they really show the way they feel about each other?
Simone said that she saw that she loved him very much and defended him, and that's why she tried to help him out. And Fern said she loved him and wanted him to feel in charge for a change.
Wanted him to feel exactly right. Wanted them to feel important, trying to build him up. So she hired the rabbit.
She hired Leonard so he could get his way, but he didn't know she did that, but she did it for the love for.
It was out of love for him.
Yeah.
Exactly. Out of love for him. And I love this. I thought this was very tender, the way Roger really loves her, because she had this mirrored cabinet. Remember that? And he would always check the screws so that it worked for her. He always did that for her. And then that was how he loved her. And sometimes he stayed up late watching TV after she had nodded off, because he didn't want to wake her and have her move her head from his shoulder. That was how much he loved her. So you see, they really do love each other. They just can't seem to connect at this particular stage in their retirement. She wanted him to be happy. The whole thing backfires, right? He feels very deceived. He's very angry. He's very hurt. That brings us to Julia and Ro. We know that Julia is expecting, and they are both arguing. What are they really covering up? What's their insecurities? What's underneath this appearance of argument?
I think it's fear of being parents.
Exactly. Again, this terrible fear that they're going to do a bad job. By the way, one of the things I thought was really funny, this line, Ro sees that Roger is really upset. He feels very deceived. And she kind of says, Ro is trying to comfort him. She says, listen, I don't think you're going to end up in a divorce, but on the other hand, I think it's really romantic when older couples get divorced. It makes me happy because it's so great when pensioners still think they're going to find someone new to fall in love with.
Oh, God.
Roger tells her she's like a self-help book, only in reverse. That was really funny. The truth is they are just afraid of becoming parents, and it isn't overwhelming. I want to get to Estelle, and then I want to talk a little bit about the take-home message of our story here. Let's talk about Estelle because she's an adorable character. Okay, what do we think about Estelle? How's she drawn up to us? How's she portrayed in the beginning? We see her as an 87-year-old old lady. What else?
Nobody paid attention to her ever.
She's
She
called
was
a
always
transparent
in the background.
personality. No one paid attention to her. What else?
She said her husband's waiting in the car.
He was parking the car.
Right,
He was parking the car. Okay. She says she's looking at the apartment for her daughter. What else? Anything else? Jackie had a chat. Go ahead. What was the chat?
Oh, I actually said, well, I adored her and guessed right away with the wine, but I'm not really sure why I guessed that, but I did. Yeah. I thought she was, in reality, she was the glue that held the entire group together and got them together.
I think you're right. That's exactly right. I think that I agree with that. Sure. What do we find out in truth? What do we find? I love that in the beginning, she has everyone introduce themselves. Like she's having a grand old time. Sandy?
Truth, her husband is dead.
Yes.
And she has even had an affair.
What kind of an affair was it?
Somebody who loves to, well, he loved to read books and her husband didn't.
That's
he was
right.
always walking around with a book.
Yes.
And her daughter has a beautiful apartment and is not looking for another.
Right. So everything is right. There's so much. Her appearance really belied a lot of truth there. Yeah.
But also, the apartment was hers.
Yeah. It had been her apartment. She then sold it to her daughter, thinking right. But then now it was for sale. But the beauty of it, remember when she said, "How did you know the wine was in the chest?" She said, "Oh, I just kind of guessed it would be there." You know, she opened up the freezer, and everybody is saying, "What? You don't open up the refrigerator when you're at an apartment open house." And she goes, "Oh, it's okay. People usually have food in there. Like, does anyone want a snack?" You know, you don't. These are all clues you don't realize. And in fact, the author is giving us all these clues that are really.
I think that through Estelle, the author was making a comment about the value and wisdom of old age, because at first we thought she was like a throwaway character. But I agree with the person who said she was the glue. And she also sort of belied that idea that old people are selfish and that they just like go away to die. She had an affair. She took in the bank robber and the children and got so much joy out of it. Like you can actually have a second life as an older person.
Right. What other thoughts? Anybody have any other thoughts? Or we can move on because we've got this standoff now. We've got these hostages in the apartment with the bank robber. By the way, the one thing that was a very key clue, how about Sandy, you mentioned about her affair, which doesn't seem like it progressed beyond the sharing of books, but
she did say she had an extra key.
She had the key and she had tried it a couple times. Even when the new people lived there, they did not change the lock. That becomes a pivotal clue. Okay, so there's this standoff. We've got the hostages in the apartment. Jim comes up to deliver the pizza, right? Posing as the policeman. The bank robber realizes right away that he's a cop. And how is it that Jim finally ends up helping the bank robber? And then most importantly, why?
Because he's a good guy.
He's a good guy. What does he realize right away listening to her story? What's your predicament? She explains the predicament. What does he realize?
People make bad choices.
Bad idea. It all starts with a bad idea, right? So it was a bad choice. And his heart is breaking from this story, right? So what is
the author is making a comment about the criminal justice system too. A lot of people that get caught up in the system are people that simply need help, and are and we don't. Our system doesn't allow for that distinction. You know, we're all about punishment, and that's not always right.
No forgiveness, which was the human element he brings to this story. He realizes, just as you say, she's going to get sucked into the whole criminal system. She's going to go to jail. She's going to lose her children. And his heart is breaking. Yeah.
And he couldn't save his sister, so he thinks maybe he could at least save her.
He can't save, in this case with Jim, he can't save his daughter, and Jack can't save
his daughter, yeah.
No, you're right, but it's right that they can't save her. So let's try for this one. Exactly. So it turns out that the bank robber goes for this idea, and she has to actually convince the worst group of hostages ever to leave and to tell the police the truth that they really don't know what happened to the bank robber, right? That they left her in the apartment. She doesn't want them to have to lie. Just say, you left me in the apartment. And of course, where does she go? What does she do? Does she disappear in thin air? No, where does she go?
You want us to give away the end?
Yeah, but after she leaves, where does she go?
Next door.
Their apartment.
She slips right into the next apartment. So Jim helps her. And why, what do you think, what, beyond the fact that yes, his heart breaks for her, what's the other reason that we know? Who's he listening to in his mind?
His wife.
His wife.
She left such an indelible impression on all of them. Here she was, this woman who said, listen, you know what? You just do what you can to save people. And he had this opportunity. And in the end, of course, he hopes his wife is proud of him. And in the same way, why do the hostages respond to the bank robber the way they do? Why do they respond that way?
You mean, why did they respond to her to let her go?
No, I'm saying, why did they want to let her go?
And empathy with her.
They have empathy.
With her. That's exactly right. They saw exactly what Davy is bringing out. The criminal justice system was going to really be awful for her. And they don't want that for her. They too are realizing that why she needed this money and what drove her to such a desperate act. And they realized too, no one got hurt.
Right.
There really was no crime committed. And how does Jack react when his father tells him the truth? And remember, Jack had taken on this case. Jack was like going to try to be a hero in this case. And now his father tells him what he did. How does Jack respond?
Well, I think that part where they come back to see is so interesting, because that was his response, like that they were checking in on her. And I think that he understood what his father did. Like he agreed in the end.
In the end, he totally did. In fact, he went ahead and told everybody it was his fault totally. He took complete blame for it. And again, he's so motivated by this impression that his mother had raised him with. He's so affected by her. The author tells us towards the end that this is a love story. So we know it's a love story. We know about Leonard and Zara. We know about Estelle had this great love affair with Newt. We know about the love that Anna Marie and Annalina and Roger develop. They get it together. Why else is it called a love story?
Well, because love is really what drove everyone and what drove their decision in the end. That's what I got out of it.
The love of the love of the bank robber for her children that drove her to do something like that.
Absolutely. What else?
Love your fellow man.
Love the kindness of strangers.
Or woman.
Love your fellow man, the kindness of strangers. And of course, all of that is interesting because in the end, what does Zara do? She recognizes, and remember, she's come the most 360 of everybody because she started out this, well, we know how she started out. And now at the end, she recognizes Jack as the teenage boy. So what does she do in a wonderful act of sweetness and kindness? What does she do?
She gives him Nadia's
information. And he goes to her and they take a look at each other and they both remember that incident of how they met. And of course, they look at each other and you get the feeling that they're both, sort of terrified at the memory, but also there's lots of laughter. And you really get the feeling that there's going to be a future for the two of them together.
Don't you also think that the love is also in the end for themselves? Because they came to accept things about themselves as not bad, but that it is, and that's okay.
Absolutely. A lot of that self-love, actually, right, coming to terms with who they are and accepting their own limitations. And of course, that last scene is very poignant too. We see where Estelle, what does she end up doing? She ends up, I love this, it's a very creative financial situation where she gives money, gets money, whatever. Anyways, Estelle ends up being able to live in The bank robber ends up moving in with Estelle, with her children, and she gets her children every other week, and they all stay at Estelle. So Estelle gets to stay in her apartment, and she's got this adorable little family with her now. And of course, who's living next door?
Ro and Julia.
Ro and Julia. And I love the fact there's one line in there that they love their baby and they're thrilled with their baby, and they love that baby so much that they would rob a bank for her. So you really get the feeling of this parental love. And of course, at the very end, what's very poignant too is what happens with Jack and Jim. What do? They get in the car.
They go on a trip.
And they ride for 24 hours to go to see.
Yeah.
And hopefully bring back their daughter/sister. They're following their mother's advice to do their best to plant a tree today, even if we know it's going to go to pieces. We save those we can. So, what do you think is the take-home message here of this book? We've talked.
I just want to say one thing that Judy Zipper had written, that she was amazed at the great character studies, now knowing that the author had mental illness issues. So, which I think is, something to discuss, and it's part of your take home of that idea of that everybody is their own uniqueness underneath, like what we see on the outside and what's going on and what brought them to that place is really, we have to realize people are coming in with all kinds of stuff. When we may deal with them, we're getting only one piece, but there's much more going on.
And we never know how heavy somebody's burden is at that particular time. Anyone else what else would you want to say about it?
Jackie wrote, "We're all in this together." Simone wrote, "Forgiveness, understanding, empathy." And Davia wrote, "The end was the best thing about the book."
And what?
The end was the best thing about the book.
Yeah.
May I say one other thing? Would that be okay, Lynda?
Sure, Jackie.
Okay. I was going to say, I think it gives you a complete clue if we all went back and looked at the beginning of the book. The actual dedication tells it all. It says, "This book is dedicated to the voices in my head, the most remarkable of my friends, and to my wife who lives with us all." And I think that says everything about this book. We are all in this together if we allow it to be together. And then we invite those people in who will accept us for what we are.
I think it's also about taking, these people were forced into a situation where they had to make connections with each other and understand one another. And I think that the author is saying that, we don't do enough of that. Why should we have to be forced into a hostage situation to get to know each other? Like he says something at the end, we walk by people every day and we brush up against their clothes, but we don't really feel the fibers or understand who they are. And we all need to make more connections with one another.
Yeah, I think that's definitely his takeaway from this is we do need to make more connections. It's a powerful thought, that your fibers, your coat can brush against mine, and we don't realize that each of us has our own stuff, and we need to be more accepting.
Sandy,
not only of ourselves, but certainly of others. Yeah, Jillian, did you have something you want to add?
Yeah, so I was going to say, you don't understand someone until you walk in their shoes. So you don't, just like at the ending where they say they would rob a bank for their, their baby.
That's right.
The other thing that what Davia was saying is that how this group of people are put together. It reminds me of the movie from the 80s, The Breakfast Club, how you had different people stuck in the same area for hours, and you develop relationships, but these people never would have looked at each other had they been in school on a regular day. Like it's, you were stuck together that you had to learn about one another and spend the time to develop a relationship with them, but they never.
So it's a very interesting construct, Jill. I'm glad because you're reminding me of something else that I was thinking about. How many of you remember the story, which we all loved years ago, Bel Canto? Do you remember that? It was the same idea of all of a sudden terrorists come in and everybody, the facade becomes shed and everybody gets to see each other and they get to see themselves as they are.
Susan Weiss also has her hand up. So Susan, if you want to look unmute.
Yeah, I'm one of those people that always reads the forward and then the acknowledgements in the back. And I'll read from what he has here. In the acknowledgements, he acknowledges Monkey and the Frog. And he says, "I'm trying to be a good dad. I really am." So that kind of makes it even a little more personalized. That means the whole time he was talking about these children, he was thinking about his own children so much that that's the nicknames he gives his kids that he put into the book.
Right, right.
The other thing that occurred to me is the Stockholm Syndrome.
Yes.
Which we all know what that is. And that's basically what happened here in a good way. And the other thing about us understanding each other more is especially true in this day and age, because our country is so polarized. And I think there are some important messages in this book about that.
Very interesting. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Any other takeaway messages?
You have for Terry, the most amazing thing is, despite the author's anxiety, he is able to create such great stories. In this, he talks about his own issues. And Fern said so much more to discuss. She said, have you ever been stuck in an elevator and, you know, with strangers, and you're not strangers when you reach the ground floor?
Yeah, that's right. But often what we're seeing is that it takes that outside influence to allow that kind of, you know, otherwise when you meet people, you're seeing only, you know, just that facade. We're just seeing that outer, however they want you to, you know, however they want to appear to the outside world. Yeah. Any other thoughts? So I was thinking to myself that I love that idea. It's painful, but the whole idea, all it takes is one bad idea. And that whole idea that people make mistakes. And that's the importance of forgiveness. That really is. And that's really what I think happened at the very end here. I think they all kind of forgave her for the whole encounter, and they were able to see beyond that and extend such empathy and such kindness to her. So to me, that's really the takeaway message, the importance of extending kindness wherever and whenever you can, whenever you have that opportunity. So I don't know if we have more time or not. I don't think so, right, Debbie? We're okay. So I just want to say I really hope you enjoyed our conversation today, and it was great to see everyone. We look forward to seeing all of you next month. Everyone be well and enjoy the holidays that are coming up.
I just have to say, you're always to the point. You're always excellent. And your choice of books also. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
And I'd like to say that I really didn't like the book, but when I heard all the things that you said, I'm going to reread it.
And when you reread it, I'll tell you what, we didn't have time to discuss. Underline all these cool things that he says that are really thought-provoking, that merit its own conversation. Yeah.
You're right. I was going to underline while I was reading it, but now I really like it.
Right. I'm so glad, Cookie, that you enjoyed it. Good.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We really
thank you, Lynda. You're fantastic.
Thank you, Lynda.
Thank you, Lynda.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye. Bye.